Hi everyone, today we're going to be looking at a game between Robert Byrne with the white pieces and Bobby Fischer with the black pieces. And for those of you that don't know, Bobby Fischer was one of the most, if not the greatest chess player that's ever lived. And this was one of his most notable games. Although this was only held in a national championship, this was a USA national championship, the attacking combination in this game is really fantastic. And even at the conclusion of this game where White had resigned, other grandmasters that were in the tournament were suggesting to other players that White was actually the one that was winning at the time White resigned. So you can see that it was, it must have been a pretty deep and wonderful attacking combination. So without any further ado, I'll just kick it off. So Robert Byrne opens with the white pieces here with d4. Bobby Fischer plays knight f6. And after c4, we see g6. So black can usually go two ways here. If white plays something like knight c3, you might see d5, which is the Grunfeld defense. Or you might even see the King's Indian with something like d6, bishop g7, this sort of structure. But in the game, white actually doesn't play knight c3. He plays g3. So after g3, White's clearly intending to put his bishop here, so black wants to counteract that diagonal by playing c6. And after bishop g2, black plays d5. So this is a Grunfeld type position now. So we see c takes d5, c takes d5, and now knight c3 developing normally. Black brings his bishop to the fianchettoed square after bishop g7, and now we see e3. And the only reason you'd want to play e3 is to put your knight there, which is what we see in the game. So after castle's kingside, now we see knight g e2. And I think the knight could have also gone here. It's completely fine, but white's looking for a bit more of an unusual setup here, I think anyway. So black plays knight c6, and now white castles kingside himself. And b6 is played, and b3 is played. So both players here having a very mirrored position here, maybe wanting to put their bishops on these sorts of squares. Black actually goes first with bishop a6, and you can see here that this bishop is now bearing down on this knight, and the rook's sitting behind it. So this knight is pinned, because if the knight moved, you'd lose the exchange here. So that does bear an influence on this game that we'll soon see. White mirrors what black did, bishop a3, which is good for white to do because obviously if it was on b2, for example, it's only staring at this pawn, whereas on the a3 square, it does have a lot more life. However, in the case of Bobby Fischer here, you can see the bishop's not really pinning anything, it's looking at a pawn. So the black bishop here is superior in this case. Black plays rook e8, seemingly to prepare e5, and also get out of this pin if the e-pawn did move. And now we see queen d2. So white's completed his development, both of his rooks are connected, and this is what's really amazing about this game, is that if you look at this, it will appear that this is just a regular game that's going to probably end very quietly and not in the next 9 moves like it does in the actual game. If any other player would see this, I think they wouldn't see anything particularly interesting about this. But with Bobby Fischer, he was really well known to be able to extract things out of very quiet positions. So the move that Bobby Fischer does to kick this whole thing off is e5, which is a great move because it looks like black is just trying to open up a lot of lines here, but in exchange, he does create a very big weakness here on d5, because you can see that after d takes e5, which is what happens in the game, and knight takes e5, you can see here that this pawn now is very weak. It's on an open file, and white could potentially gang up on this pawn. In fact, it already has 1, 2, 3 attackers on it, and only 2 black defenders. But what Bobby Fischer was thinking here in this position was that his activity and his pieces were just that much better positioned that he had a much greater possibility of more activity and greater attack. So that's what we see. Now, perhaps the blunder that white does here is he plays rook fd1. And this is what is his undoing, really, in some respects. If he had played the other rook, we wouldn't have seen the game that we're about to see. And you'll be able to see why in a second. So, after rook f d1, black is able to bring his knight now into the d3 square. Because this bishop is protecting d3, it's blocking all of this. However, it does look dangerously close to the white position. I don't think this knight here is sustainable. It will be kicked somehow. And the way white does this is he plays queen c2. Now, if it was white's turn here, he would take, black would take, white would take back, and he'd have a pretty good exchange here, a rook for a bishop and knight. So clearly, Fischer saw this when he first played knight d3. But this is what white had not seen. This next move is what white had not seen. If you want to pause the game to see Fischer's attacking combination, feel free to pause now and try to guess what Fischer's next move was. Okay, so if you were able to see it, very well done, because it is a very deep attacking combination. And it all starts with knight takes f2. Brilliant move, double exclaim. Now, related to my comment before, if the white rook was here and this one was here, then white could have taken with the rook here. But given the fact that he's used his f1 rook on d1, white takes with his king now. He doesn't really have a choice. And now we see knight g4 check. And after knight g4, this bishop also comes to life along this diagonal too, you'll notice. And behind this, of course, is the rook as well. So the king drops back after being in check. Now, if the white king came up here onto f3, then this is no good either, because you run into rook takes e3 check. And you can make your way up the board if you play king takes g4. But then after bishop c8 check, you're going to run into problems. So, in fact, I believe that's almost mate. King f4. There must be a mate here. That's mate. So that's why white couldn't play king f3. There's a mating net. So instead of that, white has to drop back to g2, or g1 rather, like he did in the game. But now we see knight takes e3. And this knight here forks both of these pieces, the queen and the rook here, on d1. So white has to move his queen, because he doesn't want to lose his queen, clearly. But most amateur players here would probably play knight takes d1. After rook takes d1, get their material back and have a pretty normal game after that. But this is Fischer we're talking about. And he uses his knight instead to take out this defender here on g2. Which is again another great move and very surprising. And after king takes g2, d4 is played. Just opening up more lines of attack here. White grabs the pawn, knight takes d4. And now we see the purpose of d4, which is to clear this diagonal. So this bishop, which had been doing a great job along here, drops back to b7 to check the king. And we also see the reason now too for Fischer wanting to take out this defender of the white king on g2. So after king f1, we see the final move of the game, which is queen d7. And it was here where white just gave up. And in fact, Fischer was reportedly not very happy with the fact that white resigned here because he wanted to play it out to the end. And the way that this game would have continued, quite possibly, is with queen f2, queen h3 check, king g1, and then the finishing blow. You can pause the game here to predict what the forcing mate sequence is here. So I'll let you pause. Okay, if you saw this, congrats. Final move to end the game, rook e1 check. And the reason for this is if you take with your queen, you're going to end up getting checkmated on g2. If you take with the rook now is no longer defending this knight, which is threatening checkmate here next turn now because of this pin. And of course you can't take this either because mate would also follow. So that was the attacking combo that won the game. So I hope you guys found that as fascinating as I did. It was a really deep combos there, and it goes to show that even other grandmasters in the game were not able, watching the game anyway, were not able to see the attacking combo that black had planned here. So yeah, thanks for watching, and until next time, see you. Bye.